Bore da pawb a dwi'n hapus iawn i ymuno chi heddi. I'm so happy to be with you all this morning as Children's Commissioner. As I was saying before we started recording, I've got a really special soft spot for Carmarthenshire. A lot of my team are based there, and I've always, in all my time in as Children's Commissioner, we've had really superb engagement from children and young people in Carmarthenshire. There's really strong participation work going on in the county, and lots of young people have been involved in supporting and scrutinising my work, which has been fantastic to see. I would love to know who's here, so I don't know whether people could just pop in the chat what organisations you're from, and I will, hopefully they'll just appear on my screen as I talk, and I'll be able to see who you are. But it would be lovely to know who you represent. But I know you're all from the voluntary sector in Carmarthenshire, and therefore doing very important work for and with children and young people. I've been asked today to talk about my current priorities, and I'm going to share some slides just because it's easier to listen to somebody usually if you've got something visual as a prompt at the same time. Thanks for popping in your chat. Several of you have already done it. That's great to see. Okay, so I just wanted to have a fairly brief discussion with you about what I'm working on at the moment and with my team, and then leave some opportunities for discussion and questions, and anything you think that from your point of view, from the children and young people that you work with and represent in Carmarthenshire, that we might be missing or that I may not have mentioned, but we may be doing work on, because I'm only bringing out a few things today. Just a reminder really that I'm the independent champion for children and young people in Wales. I'm the third Children's Commissioner, coming towards the end of my fixed seven-year term. There'll be, like Doctor Who, there'll be a new face in April, but the work will remain the same. And my team behind me, which is just over 20 people based, we've just moved to Port Talbot actually, we cover the whole of Wales, but the team will remain the same. And I have a team of people who help in different ways. I've got a policy team who help me scrutinise government and local authorities' policies, and to ask for legal change where necessary, or to demand it sometimes. I've got an advice team, investigation advice team, who run a helpline and sometimes get involved at a casework level with children and young people who are struggling to get access to their rights. So please do have a look at my website. You may sometimes feel the need to phone my team. A child can phone the team, a parent or relative can phone the team, and a worker or someone supporting them can phone my team to say, does this right? This child's been out of school for 2 years and blah, 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 you know, and people are saying they've no obligation to them, that kind of thing. I also have a participation team who help me listen to thousands of children every year using all sorts of innovative techniques. I listen to children in all circumstances, from toddlers in nurseries to right through to young adults who are care experienced. Mainly I work with children up to age 18 unless they've lived in care, in which case my legal remit covers them up to age 25. Obviously I do a lot of work with children in schools, but also in youth groups. I make it a priority for me to visit children in more vulnerable circumstances, so psychiatric inpatient wards, prisons, secure units and the like. So what are we up to at the moment? Well, these are my current priorities for this year. As you might expect, the ongoing response, our ongoing response as an organisation, but also how we scrutinise and support others to respond to the pandemic and to make sure children's rights are upheld throughout the pandemic is a top priority for me. And I'm going to talk mainly about that this morning, but I did want to mention some of the other things that we're involved in as well. We continue to press hard the no wrong door approach for children's mental health and well-being. That means that, you know, we want to stop that experience many of you will be familiar with, of children and their families continually being told they've got the wrong kind of problem. They've been waiting on a waiting list a long time. It's a bit like a game of snakes and ladders. They finally get up the ladder, get their first appointment, and they are told actually they've been on the wrong queue all along, and slide back down that snake and have to start again. We're really trying to encourage our agencies to come together and make sure that children get the right response first time. So I'm currently revisiting every region, and I did West Wales region last week, revisiting every regional partnership board to really press them on what progress they're making in that. And I have to say there's real regional variation on progress there. Our third priority is making sure that organisations put children's human rights at the centre of what they do. We concentrate mainly on our big public organisations like government and all of our health boards, all of our police forces, many of our local authorities, Public Health Wales, Natural Resources Wales, our transport system, that they're all thinking about how they listen to children, how they communicate with children, and how they think about issues like equality and diversity and other important human rights issues. So we work really hard to do that. We've got lots of organisations on a journey towards doing that, because nobody can do that kind of thing overnight. And I'm pleased to say that in your region, your police force and your health board and your fire and rescue service have recently joined together to listen to children in the area, and then to write a children's charter which sets out how they will uphold children's rights. And I was really pleased to go to the launch of that in Carmarthen about 3 weeks ago. Project Vote is the fourth one. We're very keen that children take up their citizenship rights and learn about their citizenship rights for life. So in May, we ran as well as supporting 16 and 17-year-olds to take up their opportunity to have a vote this time, we ran a parallel election for 11 to 15-year-olds, and thousands and thousands, tens of thousands of children took part in that, despite all the disruption in schools. And it meant that they learned about the voting process. They took part in as near as possible an experience of voting and learned about democracy. And we're repeating that in May next year for the local elections, because the local elections have got a poor turnout amongst adults, and yet, you know, we all know our local services actually make a huge difference to our daily lives. So we want to make sure that right from the age of 11, people really understand, children really understand the importance. We hope there's a ripple effect and they go home and say to their parents and older siblings, you should vote, you know, this is important. Stop moaning about the rubbish not being collected in the schools and that kind of thing. You've got to vote. So that's a big hope for us. And lastly, we just continue to do lots of work with schools. Schools, many of you might be school governors or involved in schools in other ways. And schools have got lots of new duties, which, you know, on top of their COVID response is a huge issue for them at the moment. But we're working hard with them to make sure that they have the tools they need to implement their new duties on promoting mental health and well-being and their whole school approach, new duties under the Curriculum Act to make sure that they promote children's human rights in schools. We insisted on that being in the Act, so now we're giving them the materials to do it. And also we're supporting local authorities to implement new duties under the Additional Learning Needs Act. So to move on to coronavirus, you can read all about what we've done in relation to the pandemic in two reports we've written, one last September, one this September, which we call Coronavirus and Us, which is really about what we've done to respond to the pandemic, but also how well we think the government and other public services have done. So we're using World Health Organization priorities for children, so global priorities for what people should do in a pandemic, and we weigh up how well Wales has done on that. And as you might expect, we think Wales has done well, in fact better than the rest of the UK on some issues like free school meal provision and some of the response to digital poverty, although not all of it, and some other measures that they've taken place, and have fallen short in others. So you can read all about that on our website. But these are what we've worked hard to do to make sure that that we've all responded well and children have been protected during the pandemic. So we have made sure that children, these are the 4 priorities we set out in the first week of lockdown last March, and we've tried to stick to them ever since, and we still need to be doing them, as you would imagine, because case rates are still very high. Make sure children and young people have clear and reliable information and advice. And you can see our information hub, our bilingual information hub, which has clear information and advice and has been well used throughout the pandemic. That's on our website. Do direct children and their families to it, especially if they've got concerns about things like what are the current rules in school, how can I find child-friendly advice on vaccinations now that 12-year-olds and up are eligible for it? How do I get mental health support at the moment, and those kind of things. And there's lots of fun things on our information hub for children to do at home, including videos by my participation team on free things to do at home to play with your children. The second thing we did was to check that children who might need more support than others are safe in getting what they need. And that really our concern was children in care, children in prisons, children in hospitals, children who might be separated from their families in any way. Refugee and asylum seeking children, and we worked hard. We checked in on all of those settings weekly for much of the pandemic, and we still are involved when institutions have high case levels and might be going into higher levels of lockdown. The third one was to make sure that children and young people are listened to. I hope you saw and encouraged children to take part in our Coronavirus and Me surveys. The first survey last May 2020 was the largest survey at that moment in the world conducted with children about their experiences in the pandemic. And over 2 surveys, we repeated it in January. We listened to over 40,000 children in Wales, which is more than 1 in 20 children in Wales, and made sure that fourth priority, that the findings from those surveys were listened to by government and they responded to them. And we've got a number of examples in our Coronavirus and Us report about how regulations were changed and rules were changed in response to what children said they were struggling with most. I'm now just going to show you a couple of highlights of what children told us they were experiencing during the second survey in January this year. But please do look at the original reports. With those reports, we also did further analysis and reported on different age groups. So there's specialist reports on our website, the experiences of disabled children, the experiences of children from Black, Asian and minority ethnic backgrounds, and the experiences of children in every local authority were sent to each local authority confidentially to make sure that they could tailor their responses according to children in their area. So we did this survey twice, as I say, with other partners, but we led on it and did all the analysis and writing. And there were different versions available from age 3 and up, including an accessible version for children who need additional help with reading and writing. So for 3 and 7-year-olds, they mainly drew, but they also had some simple things they could write as well. And you know, this is a typical one we received from someone in your region, actually. I miss my friends, but I've got my brothers. So a lot of children, if they were safe at home and their parents had time to look after them, weren't working shifts as key workers, some of them had actually some very happy times, especially in the first lockdown when the sun was shining, but they missed school, they missed friends, they missed their socialization. I'm afraid that, you know, feelings like that went down in the second lockdown as it did for adults as well, and all felt very long. Here's a very different kind of data. It's survey data for 7 to 18-year-olds. And we asked them about their feelings. This is in January 2021. And what you can see, the ages are along the bottom. So age 7 on the left, age 18 on the right. What you can see is those feeling safe most of the time. That's the blue line, declined substantially across the age groups, as did those who felt happy most of the time. It's fairly steady in primary school years and then declined substantially, with the lowest age 17. And what we saw was that teenagers in particular struggled more than younger children with the lack of socialisation outside of the home. And we measured the number of people in their home, and for teenagers it made no difference how many siblings they had, because they actually want to be with their friends, not their younger brothers and sisters, for example. But for primary school children, they were happier and less lonely if they had siblings. And here are the negative emotions: feeling worried, and you can see that goes in the opposite direction. Those who feel worried most of the time, age 7, only 10. They could also say some of the time, they could also say not very often. So we gave them lots of options, but right up to 30% of 18-year-olds. And we saw these older age groups really worrying about their exams by January in particular, and their futures. The purple one is feeling sad, and the pink one is feeling lonely. And the loneliness one was really, and you can see it goes up to 40% of 17-year-olds. I think the loneliness one was very important because I think, understandably and quite rightly, our concerns in the first lockdown was for older people and for disabled people, and really thinking about loneliness amongst people who might be living on their own. But actually, this data showed that teenagers were very lonely, and it had quite a profound impact on the government, and really made them think about trying to get young people back into socialisation and schools as quickly as they felt they could safely do that. And there was a lot of concerns about confidence in learning. So this is children who do not feel confident about their learning. This was back in January, and it went right up to 65% of 17-year-olds, again, worried about their future and their qualifications. Although the feedback from children, young people, was that the offer from schools really improved over the year as schools got more confident about their online delivery. But just want to remind people that for some young people, the lockdown was a really interesting and fun time for them, which is probably, a bit of a surprise to some of us. The first one, for those who don't speak Welsh, is saying, I feel I've developed as a person during the lockdown, and I felt quite happy, actually. And for children who had a stable and well-resourced homes, and also that was experience for many of them, and also for children who perhaps find school a struggle, perhaps because of bullying, perhaps because of it doesn't meet their needs in terms of their special needs. Some of them found the predictability and quietness of home better for them. However, many have struggled during lockdown, as you'll be well aware because of the work that you do. This was people saying they really struggled with education, too much work, finding it hard to cope. That was a big contrast to the first lockdown, when most of them were saying they weren't being sent anything to be done. As I say, schools really stepped up their provision in the second lockdown, and real worries about the future and how long it was all going on. And the final slide I want to show you on data is about play. And what we actually found in May 2020 was that more children, more than the majority of children, said they were actually playing more during the first lockdown than they normally would. And that went down to a minority of children in those dark, slightly bleak days of January 2021. So I'm pleased to say that in response to that data and all the data we'd shown, that I made a call on the government, along with Sport Wales and the Earth, to fund opportunities for children to have fun over the summer, to relax and play, to do sport and to socialise. There's a photo from an event I attended in the summer. It was so nice to see children out and playing again. And that led to initially the Have a Hoyle funding, the Summer of Fun funding, which was 4.5 million for funding, and a lot of that I believe went to the voluntary sector, and now we've just had a further announcement of even more money, up to £20 million for a Gaeaf o Les, a winter of well-being, they're calling it now, the government. And I believe that some of that money has already started to trickle out. I was speaking to somebody from the third sector in Swansea yesterday who said that they'd received funding for half term, but that goes up to the end of March. It also involves funding for extended school days in some pilot areas, not to sit and do maths for an extra hour, but to actually do sport, arts, and other opportunities that many children miss out on. And the idea of that pilot is that that could become a long-term provision if it works well. And overall, of course, there's funding, which the government's calling Renew and Recover, mainly led by the Education Department, which we are keeping a close eye on. It's a lot of money. It's 150 million this year to check that it is going to support children who have missed out most during the pandemic, get that funding. So please do keep in touch with my office and me and have a look at, there's much more detail on all of that on my website. I'm going to stop sharing so I can see your faces. And Jackie, I do have time to stay for a bit if people have got questions or comments.
Sally, I know you know the priorities obviously that you've been working on over the last 7 years have changed considerably with the onset of the pandemic, and obviously, you know, one of the things going forwards is like making sure that children and young people's voices are heard. So for me, hearing about children having more time to play is really important. My background is in children's play. So worked a lot with Play Wales, worked a lot with Play England and Scotland, and also the UN CRC, which there's a lot going on at the moment, isn't there, with the rights of the child. So just thinking about how you've had to shift and to make sure that you hear those children's voices, like some of those statistics that you showed were really, really compelling in regards to, like, you know, when they're younger, they feel really happy and safe, but as they get older, it comes down. So that concerns me a little bit, just thinking of the background of how that happens and that transition from being up there to coming all the way down here potentially.
Yes, I mean, it is, if you do surveys outside of a national emergency, you do find that teenagers tend to be less optimistic and about life in general. And that's a developmental stage, you know. I think, you know, everyone gets a little bit more cynical as they get older, but we did find the very dramatic changes, just as you say, Jackie, very compelling and worrying, and it fitted with what I was hearing in focus groups with young people as well, with a lot of anxiety, particularly about their futures. So we've worked really hard to try and encourage employers and universities and others to give messages of hope and actually to recognise what young people have been through, but also to recognise what they've gained during the pandemic as well. In fact, I'm just finalised a letter to go, which we're leading on, but to go from all the UK Children's Commissioners to Universities UK. We've kept in close contact with them for the whole pandemic period. But again, I wanted to write to them, having listened to young people on my strategic advice panel of young people, which has Carmarthenshire representatives on it, and we're recruiting again for members. But we're writing them again to say, young people are saying they're really worried. They're going back to formal exams next year, but some of them are worried about how much they've missed and how uneven that experience has been. You know, if you've had, you know, like my 16-year-old, you know, your own room, your own desk, your own laptop, and parents who are confident to help you, and who've got you up in the morning and sat you down, you know, you're in a very different circumstance to someone who might be living in a house where, with lots of siblings, where you're sharing devices, where your parents aren't confident because they don't have English or Welsh as a first language, or where they, you know, they themselves, you know, aren't educated to the level that, you know, you are at A level. You know, we all know, the people around this in this virtual room know the sort of challenges that families face. You know, education is always unequal, unfortunately, and young people applying to university and for jobs and apprenticeships are never on an even playing field. But particularly now, you know, we know the pandemic has increased inequality. So we're writing again to say, be aware of this. Ask your admissions officers to be aware of it, be aware of what they're putting in their personal statements, think of the things they might have gained if they've been a young carer, if they've volunteered in their community. You know, they may get a B instead of an A, but think of all the life things they've learned. Yeah. So that's the sort of thing we're trying to do. I'm very anxious actually about young people behind the scenes, but I'm trying in my public messaging to also say, you know, young people are going to recover from this. They're you know, many of them have thrived during this period, because I think it can become self-fulfilling as well if we're too negative all the time about a lost generation or anything.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. Sharon, do you want to unmute yourself and ask that question?
Oh, I didn't see it in the chat.
Hey, Sally. I was just wondering, you suggested that, or I kind of guessed it anyway, that the teenagers are prone to feel sort of less positive. So is there some sort of survey or report that we can look at to compare how different it is?
Yes, a lot of surveys don't do such a wide age range as we did, so it's harder to then see the contrast between the primary and secondary. The best data we have in Wales is the School Health Research Network data, the SHERN it's called, which every secondary school in Wales takes part in, but it is only from age 11 and up. And it runs every 2 years, and they've got excellent data on things on well-being, mood, mental health, health habits in general. Every school gets their data back individually for each school, as well as there being national stats. So if you're involved in a local school, they should be using that data to think about their health and well-being offers. I see there's a comment as well from somebody, I think, representing young people with learning disabilities, and we do have a separate reports on our website about how the pandemic's affected young people with disabled young people. We've worked really hard to listen to disabled young people, not all of whom, of course, were able to take part in our survey. Normally, if we're consulting with young people, we would go out and spend time with young people with very complex disabilities to listen to them in different ways. But my team have worked with a group of young people with learning disabilities throughout the pandemic, to both increase our skills as a team to listen to young people with learning disabilities, but also to support others too. So they've run a youth group for young people with learning disabilities in Bridgend online during the pandemic every week. And through that, we've learned lots of skills of listening to young people in a different way and hearing about their experiences over the last year and a half.
Great, superb. And one thing to ask as well is, I know the Older People's Commissioner has held sessions for third sector organisations to find, you know, to obviously find out views of the older people during the pandemic and to move things forward. I know that your prime people are actually children, but I wonder, would you be looking to do something like that in the future, holding sessions like this one for third sector organisations, just to find out the views that they're gathering in?
I think that would be really useful, and I think it's a really useful idea. I've done quite a few of these sessions with local authority level voluntary organisations. I was with your equivalents in Wrexham a couple of weeks ago, so I've done it that way, and I've heard from some specific groups. So East, a lot of you will know the Ethnic Youth Support Team network. I go to they run a children and young people's network, a bit like this one, representing not just their staff, but also staff from other organisations that represent youth from minority backgrounds. And I've gone to their roundtable regularly throughout the pandemic and been able to pick up with government some specific issues that the children and people they were representing were facing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Do you have a newsletter that people can sign up to as well, Sally? Or?
We don't do that. We just we do much more tailored mailings out. But you know, if you follow us on Twitter and Facebook, then you'll see everything that we put out. But we have community ambassador groups, as well as our school ambassador groups, and I think we've got Carmarthenshire Youth Council is one of our community ambassador groups, but I think that might be the only Carmarthenshire group we've got. But it's where we listen to children and young people who might not become the school ambassador. You know, they may not be the one who gets elected by the class to be the ambassador in school, and we make sure we're listening to children with a wide range of experiences. So have a look at our community ambassador scheme in particular.
All right, so we won't take up any more of your time.
It's
Thank you
lovely
so
to
much.
see you all. Thanks for
Yeah.
all the work you've done. I should have started with this, and I know you all worked so hard during the pandemic to support children and their families in Carmarthenshire, and you continue to do so. And please do have a look at our website and see if there's any of our materials. Got lots of resources there, lots of resources you can use with children and young people. And if any of your groups want to engage with us, want one of my team to come and do a rights session with your group of children, anything like that, have a look at what we've got to offer on the on our website.